So here's the community. There's all sorts of posts. There's a few different topic areas: Android, news, development, web development, design, cloud, etc. We post all of our slides from past presentations here in the media section. So you can go through those. You can make comments on them. There's also some videos and things like that in there. That's where a lot of the collaboration takes place, and also where we post events and stuff like that. We also post contests. So just finished the Google Fit Developers Challenge, which is the 11th. Today's the last day of judging. So February 17th was the last day to submit. It was from November until February. I tried to hold some meetups, try to get some teams together for that, but didn't have a whole lot of luck.
Did you submit an app?
I did submit.
What was it?
It's called Surf Monitor. Let's see if I can pull it up real quick. So it's just an app for checking the waves. You see the colors are sort of the status. Green is good, red is bad, and it pings the buoys, and these are all the buoys, and you can select a buoy off the coast, whichever one you like. Certain buoys report differently, so it gives you a little bit of control. You get notifications. So if the waves are good, it will actually buzz you and let you know. It comes up on your watch too. If the waves aren't good, it kind of hides in your notifications. So you won't see it, but if you swipe it open, it'll be there. So you can kind of just keep track of what the status is. And the fit part is this piece where you can log a session. Say I just surfed 2 hours, and it will show up in your Google Fit app showing that you had that activity along with you're running, bicycling, other sorts of activities. We'll see. The prizes are pretty interesting. Here. So the sponsors were Adidas, Polar, and Withings. The prizes are Withings scale. Polar's got 2 heart rate monitors. They say are worth $140 or something each. Android Wear watch, probably just the LG or Samsung. And 2 Adidas XL Speed Cell. I don't know what they are, but some sort of wearable device that will integrate with Google Fits, and I'm happy to have any kind of device that I can develop and play with. So those are kind of like the consolation prizes. So about 100 will get an Android Wear, and then the Adidas sensors. Well, 100 in each category. There's new apps and old, existing apps that added a Fit API. And then 50 will win all of them. 50 from each will win all the devices, but not the promotions. The top 6 in each will actually be promoted and shared on Google Play, featured in the App Store. So you're going to be featured, you're going to be on their blog, you're going to be in their newsletter to millions of people. So that's the big prize. You don't actually win money, but if your app is sold and you've got 5,000 new customers, you might have just made quite a bit of money. So we'll see. You should hear more about that. Tomorrow is the first day they say they might announce the prizes and winners, but I think there's a week window. So sometimes they are not early on in that window. And then last year was the Google Cloud Developer Challenge. And usually there's a challenge around September to November that ends in January, February, the last 3 years at least. So ngConf, that's what this is mostly about tonight. It's about 800 people the last couple of years. It's the first Angular conference. It's a community-driven and hosted and organized event, so this is not a Google conference, although a large amount of the Angular team was there and a lot of the contributors from the community. But it's all organized actually by GDG organizers and like, people that I know. So they just put this together. They said, oh, there's not an Angular conference. We're going to do one. And Google supported and sent speakers. And now it's second year. And both years, the tickets sold out in like 30 seconds or less. So, a lot of interest in Angular. A lot of great speakers. Pretty much like 99% of the best Angular speakers out there, including Brad Green, Misko, Igor, core founders of Angular, as well as a couple Microsoft guys, which we'll get to why they were there. Netflix was there with a few people. A number of other companies who, because Angular is not a Google thing, it's a community, open source. Everything they do is on GitHub. All their design documents and everything else are open.
Is Netflix written in Angular?
Netflix is using Angular for a number of things. I believe there are a lot of their internal apps for doing visualizations of the data and trying to follow what's happening. Their big talk was on reactive programming. RxJS is the framework. So it's really focused on tons of stuff happening and updates coming to your screen really quickly and being able to process those quick enough. And this Ben Lesh guy is also on Netflix. He was there talking, I think, just about the newest version of Angular 1.4 or some of that. The entire playlist is on YouTube. So what I'm thinking for the next Wednesdays that are coming are to watch some of these videos, talk about them, but they don't have to be just videos from the conference. I want to go around the room in a minute and ask about what people are looking for, because we could do a mix of these videos as well as some more like introductory, learn the basics of Angular videos. So if I go through these slides and you see, because each slide is roughly one video presentation. If you see an area that you're really interested in and you'd like to see more, and if you ask me a bunch of questions, I'll probably say, okay, we're definitely going to watch that one. Then I'll put that on the list. They did it really well, so each video is only around 18 to 25 minutes. So the conference moved really quickly. There wasn't any really long, drawn-out talks. So let's go around the room real quick. Just say your name, what you're working on, where you're working, and what your experience with Angular is. If you've been doing it for a couple of years, if you're interested but haven't started with it. So I am Michael Prentice. I'm currently working at Harris. I have been doing Angular for about a year and a half. Mostly started out as a hobby thing, just updating the GDG website and doing some things like that. It just was really productive and easy to do. And then it found its way onto my resume, and very quickly people were calling me, and Angular is very much in demand. And so it's a good time to learn it. Angular 2 will even make it more in demand. And some companies are just like, come here, we will teach you Angular. We need Angular developers so badly.
Locally?
Yes.
Hi. Yes, I'm yes, I've got a speech impediment, so John, yes, thank you, Mike. It gets hard sometimes, but I have to handle it. Yes, I've used Angular. I think I used it 1.2. I think yeah, but I haven't used it recently then.
Alright, my name is Rashil. I'm a research assistant at Prudential Technology. I've been working on Angular, well, using Angular for about a year now. Not sure which version I started with or which one I'm using right now. They're doing basic things and I'm working with directives and building services with this. And actually working on a project that involves developing UI with AngularJS.
I'm Troy Togwiller. I also work at Florida Tech. I have never used Angular. I'm just interested.
I'm Tom Eskridge. I work at the Harris Institute at Florida Tech with these guys. And we're looking at taking a number of, we do a lot of visualization work, a lot of cybersecurity work, and we're looking at taking a lot of the visualizations that we've been doing in Java and Swing and other languages and moving that all over toward web-based interfaces. So we had a good suggestion that Angular would be the right way to go, and so we're trying to learn more about it and find people who know more about it, so we can kind of ramp up some of these efforts.
Yeah, the app I work on at Harris is data visualization.
Oh, okay, cool.
I've got some experience there. You've got questions?
No, lots.
I'm Mike Keels. I work with Mike Prentice at Harris. I've worked with Angular a little bit, probably over the past year, on and off with Angular. And actually, I have a side project that I've been doing for the last 10 years. It's built in at least 10-year-old technology, Java server faces, that I'm trying to figure out how to bring into modern era.
Hussein Frosh. I work with Chris, and we are at a technology backend for a mobile application that was built in Rails, and we're migrating over to the Meetup stack. So don't know much about Angular, but need to learn pretty quickly. And as far as what I'm looking for, so this is great. Tutorials, doing a sample project together, basics, and also understanding the breadth of kind of the capabilities of the language. And the other thing is that you can't get from books is kind of first-hand experience. So typical gotchas, or if there's any type of Angular way of doing things, then avoiding those architecture kind of pitfalls.
I'll cover a style guide, and there's a link in the slides for reference of sort of how you should be styling and formatting and arranging, how you should be doing Angular.
So I'm going to kind of mimic what Hussein said. My name's Chris Dunkel. I work with Hussein, and we're kind of in a similar situation. I've been being kind of the Scrum Master, main point of contact for a lot of our interns who know a lot more about mean development and JavaScript development than I do, and so I'm trying to come up to speed so I can give them more answers than just I don't know, or go ask Dave, who is our other developer. We actually have Dave, who's one of our other co-founders, and Jake, who's one of our developers, also listening in on Hangouts here. So they're in Orlando, so they couldn't make it.
Okay, I'm Monica. I also work with Mike Prentice. My experience with Angular is projects that I'm working at Harris, and I'm actually interested in learning more directives. I'm Debbie, and I've been doing web development since '96.
part-time as a mom for quite a few of those years, and I've been getting back into the swing of things, and I think Angular is, as far as web development goes, where I really think it's a good place to hang your hat. In production, I've just done some very simple ng repeats and ng filter type things that really spruce up a page and make it a lot more modern. But I'd like to do a single page app so that it feels like it's native. That's where I would like to go with Angular. And as far as like future Wednesdays, I don't know if any of you remember the Python study group that we had, that we all just like came together and worked on our stuff with people that knew what they were doing. I really like that format. And I think it's one of the Egghead IO videos that I watched, but I can't find it anymore. That talked about do they call it the compile or something? Yeah. Like that explained what was going on at each stage as Angular's running. And that really, I can't find it anymore, but that really helped me understand the layers and how to code better. So I'd love to find that one again.
Okay, just making sure you know. My name is Jim. I'm a software developer over at Palace. I've never used Angular for anything in production. I took one little lab thing we did here, or one or two things we've done here, just here to try to not go stale.
Okay, on the topic of videos and whatnot, if you can't wait for every Wednesday, which you certainly shouldn't, there's a lot of material out there. If you check out my YouTube, there's playlists for just about everything, which you'll see ngConf is one of them. Angular, I have a playlist for, as well as Egghead.io, AngularJS. So the Egghead will link over to John Lindquist, and you'll see I've watched most of these. This is just a big list of free videos, each one 2 to 6 minutes long, very focused on this is Angular copy, or this is the router, this is ngView. Just 2 minutes, you see code as he talks, you see it actually working on the other side. So if you're looking to learn Angular, this is the place to start. Egghead.io, and there's very focused, very simple things that you can start learning with. Also on my GitHub, I have a couple Angular projects that you can mess with. One of them is the actual GTG Space Coast project. You can look at that. And I believe I've got a couple others on GitHub as well. My Angular JS list has got a lot more stuff that's more advanced, like Mountain View, Silicon Valley meetups talking about writing directives, Google I/O videos about Angular on performance and testing, and so these are a lot more sort of intermediate, advanced type videos. A couple of them apparently are done. So let me get into the slides, and it sounds like we've got a pretty good mix. Some people interested in learning, some others interested in sort of getting into some of the more intermediate topics. So I will go through this fairly quickly, about 20 slides or so. So the conference was great. I had been to GWT conferences and Google I/O and some others. They were very friendly, nice, welcoming community events. I really enjoyed them. JavaScript conference, my first time, I was a little bit like okay, is this going to be really weird? All these people are going to be like crazy hipsters. Certainly at the beginning, it kind of felt like that. But as I met more people, I sort of got the feel of it. But they're definitely a lot more sort of energetic than some of the other conferences. There were people just like a lot of the presentations had people showing videos and running out on stage. Jeff Krause ran out dressed with like a pink shirt and a pink headband because he had this whole skit and film of him running from California to get to the conference because he slept in, and like every video had some sort of comedy thing. And unfortunately, I worked a little too much today because I knew like this presentation would be a lot better if I could put an animated GIF in between every slide, because there was actually one presentation which was the best there that was almost entirely animated GIFs, but hilarious. So a lot more like comedy and joking and whatnot than I'd seen at other conferences. A lot of times at other conferences, they kind of like, oh, did you hear about blah, blah, blah? And everyone's like, haha. But at this, there were people like, you know, rolling on the floor, laughing and screaming. And it was much more energy than I see at a lot of other conferences. So the community keynote, this is the first talk that came out. A lot of just information about sort of the future of Angular, what's happening with the community, a lot of sort of giving thanks to the community, talking about certain companies who had been contributing, but then wanted to get someone basically onto the Angular team, even though that company's paying them. So because their project is built on Angular and they're so dependent upon it, they want to make sure that it's successful, and also that in the design meetings, that they have someone there representing their company at every meeting. So that's something they sort of more formalize now, where if you have existing contributors to Angular and you wanted to take the next step and actually get them in there, that there is a path for doing that. That's something that is already proven, and they've got a process for it. So they focused on, you know, the community's been asking for better routing, internationalization, and performance as of, you know, 1.2 and some in 1.3. And basically, that's what they're focused on, is what people need, what the community needs, what the biggest pain points are. And that's the focus not only on 1.4, but 1.5 and 2.0. 1.5 is really about how do we get to 2.0. If you heard anything from NG Europe in the fall, they announced 2.0 and people started jumping off buildings and like freaking out. Like, it's a whole new Angular, it's not even Angular, we should call it something else. My app will never make it from here to there. And, you know, they were going crazy. Like, there's no more scope, there's no more controllers. Like, oh my God. And they don't have a migration path. What are they thinking? These people are idiots. I can't believe that they created Angular. Well, they were somewhat sort of poking the bear and trying to get some reaction out of people and see really how passionate they were. And if you just do one Google search, you'll see like 300 blog posts and articles about people from like Ember or people from jQuery or whatever. They're all excited about how this, you know, Angular is terrible. And, you know, so even people who didn't care or say they didn't care, they got really into it. But it just shows how much attention there is, how much the community is involved, how many people care about what's happening with Angular. So 1.x is going to be supported, they said, but the vast majority have moved to 2, so that means, you know, 1.5, 1.6, 1.7, maybe 1.15, who knows. That will continue on, but as you'll see, they're going to want to go to Angular 2 if at all possible. You don't have to, because for many apps, you don't need to show 20,000 elements on the screen, or you do something really quick. For just basic forms and data entry, Angular 1.2 or 1.1 might be all you're ever going to need, and it's not really going to break anytime soon. So,
is 2 out now, or is it
2 is an alpha.
in alpha?
So there's a new site for Angular 2. It's this angular.io instead of angularjs.org, I believe. It's built with Angular Material and Angular 1.x. That's because Angular 2 is not ready for production, so they're not building their production site with Angular 2. It's, and also Angular Material for Angular 2 is not there yet. It only is for Angular 1. It's a real nice site though, really slick. I definitely recommend checking it out if you're interested in Angular Material. It has some good examples of how to use it. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. So they talked about the migration path. There's Big Bang and incremental. Big Bang is like you just go through your entire code base and you make all the changes and your app works with Angular 2. Incremental, they showed a tree. They talked about a lot of that, how you could replace certain leaves or certain branches of your routing with the new Angular while keeping the rest with the old Angular. So there's a lot more focus in Angular 2 and later versions of Angular 1 on enterprise apps, on big apps. People are building much, much bigger apps with Angular, especially at Google. Like you see, there's an extra 400 apps now, 2,000 internal apps at Google. So they're building bigger and bigger things, and they need the performance and a lot of that, and you can't migrate those necessarily in a big thing. So John Papa, who is in Orlando, he's the Angular GDE for this sort of South region area in Angular. He is going to be working on the migration guide. He has the style guide already, and we'll get to that a little bit later. It's all hosted on GitHub. And the other sort of guide to migrating as of now is just to follow the style guides and best practices. And it'll be a lot easier to do that migration because they're focusing on how to migrate from like that sort of state to the new one. So Angular 2 is alpha. The focus, simplicity, consistency, speed, flexibility, and productivity. So they're, these are basically all of the problems that Angular has. So they're trying to fix everything. Certain things with directives and other pieces of compile and things like that are a little complicated. They're going to make those easier. Consistency, there's some issues with services and providers and factories, and there's what is what and why are they all different. So they're going to clean that up, and some of things, discussion around that is what the really hilarious session was about. It's just sort of kind of nonsense naming and weird things. Speed is definitely an issue for bigger apps, for apps that have to do near real-time display of data, or have many, many thousands of elements, or changing elements and watchers. Flexibility, that's something Angular's always been about, is, there's 5 different ways of doing everything. So we want to stay flexible so that people can build any sort of app. And then productivity, it's already one of, if not the most productive framework, but they're really focused on continuing to push that forward, giving you better tools in the IDE, giving you better tools for internationalization, things like that. So A lot of the same features that you already have right there listed in the middle are just getting better. And then the new features, viewports, languages, web components. A lot of the changes are around enabling web components to work with Angular easily. There's one presentation where they show how to get it working with Angular 1. There's some sort of hacky things you have to do. There's some extra code you have to write. It's not ideal. But with Angular 2, mostly that will all be automatic and it will be much easier. Some new syntaxes, the unidirectional data flow, and the fast change detection. So we're going to tell a little bit more. And then this one was one that kind of came out of the blue. They announced AppScript, I think in October, November, as this new sort of pseudo language of ES6 and annotations and whatnot. And a lot of people said, "Oh my God, not another live script, action script, TypeScript, Dart, etc." But they worked with Microsoft and they made a deal where they could take all the features of AppScript and make them available in TypeScript. And so that's also bringing Microsoft on board, and they're going to be helping enable that a lot. They're working on an IDE integration for that. So that is another sort of theme of the conference. They had talked to a lot of Ember developers. They had talked to the Microsoft developers. They had been meeting with and talking with React. So Angular is not like, we're Angular, we're the best. They want to get everyone's ideas, talk about them, and try to find ways that, make sure that Angular and React can work in the same app. Or the Angular and Ember, you can mix the two together. And they made a big push about encouraging everyone there to be, it's not death matches or this framework versus that. It's more of like how they can work together, how they can share strategies and different approaches for solving problems. So there's a whole presentation on Angular 1.4. Lots of interesting stuff. Some of the big highlights are here. More speed, which is definitely great. 1.3 is certainly considerably faster than 1.2. And 1.4 is going to be even faster, use even less memory. The new router is coming. If you've done any sort of complicated app, you've probably run into some issues with the routing. You can't have nested routes and things like that with the default Angular router. A lot of people, including my team, have gone to using something called UI router, and that takes care of a lot of those issues. It's still not perfect. It's still not very easy to do lazy loading. But the new router will be there in 1.4, and if you can, they're working on a migration path from UI router to the new router, as well as the ng router to the new router. But if you can get onto that, your migration to 2 will be a lot easier. And that's a separate GitHub project, and it's going to be updated and everything separately and available both in Angular 1.4 and Angular 2. So it'll be the same router on both. Lots of animation improvements. Anchoring is pretty awesome. There's a whole separate video on animations. Anchoring allows you to have one view and another view and have anchors in those views so that your animations actually go from there to there. So your list elements slide in and hook right in there rather than just sort of disappear. And you can even have it on page transitions, so you've got a whole other view, but this comes in and it'll land at the bottom of the page because that's where it's going to. So it allows the sort of things you need for material design, where your animation is really helping lead usability and lead the user to see like where it went to, and not just, oh, it spun around and poofed. It doesn't help anybody. The callback piece is knowing when your animations are done. So if you're going to transition off the page or you're going to hide something, wait till it's done animating to do that. And with a callback, you'll know. Better performance, better I18N tooling, the whole presentation on internationalization. So Angular 2, we already talked about TypeScript a little bit. Some of the annotations are this template, app component. They really simplify things. It's a different syntax for sure. ngRepeat is going to be this for each. There's no more ngRepeat technically. But these for eaches are going to be a lot more performant and a little more flexible. I don't want to get too deep into that. The other big syntax changes are these two. So property bindings, you don't necessarily do like ng model is this, you do, or you don't, like in your directive, you don't say this attribute is this thing, you just use one of these bindings, so you put the name of it in brackets and then the value. And events statement that is like ngClick. Now you will just put click inside the parentheses, and this allows working with web components to be improved as well as some other things. It's a little strange at first, but once you see it a couple times, it starts to make sense and doesn't seem too bad. The other big change is the digest is no longer a cycle. They call it now like, oh, the digest cycle. Be careful. Like, it can take a long time. You update something and it takes some seconds before this other thing updates. What's going on? Sometimes it would go through the cycle and then have to come back and do some looping and everything was updated. But now it's going to be a single pass, a single graph, it just goes through it, it never goes back, which is all the difference in the world because it is like that fast compared to some of the stuff today. I'm not going to go too deeply into the new router, but they've got, instead of ngView, there's sort of a ngView port. ngLink allows you to have clicking on a route actually go to an href, so an actual URL. That's supposed to be state params. So state params are used in UI router, but they're going to go route params in the new router. We talked a little bit about mixing and the rest. The lazy loading part is still a draft proposal investigation. It's not going to probably be in 1.4, but it's coming soon. That's about it. Lots of this video has lots of good examples about how the code is going to look and what it's going to behave like. So that's a good one to really understand what it all means. There is a life cycle. If you've worked with some other products, or frameworks like GWT or Android or others, you might have seen things like this. So it's got these steps that it goes through before it actually activates or displays a new view. It can allow checking authentication. It can say, oh, you changed this form, but you didn't save. You really want to navigate away. Things like that are all kind of built into the router. Today, you can do some things like your own to build that into your router, your routing, but this will be all built right in. You just sort of define these functions in your controller, and if the router sees them, it will call them. So web components, there's a lot to talk about here. The main idea is just right now you've got to do a bunch of manual plumbing to get everything hooked together right. In Angular 2, most of that will be automatic. There's a whole session on that as well. So TypeScript is, I guess it's a language, but it also, like ES3, ES5 are valid TypeScript. So even if you don't use any TypeScript features, your regular JavaScript will be compiled by the TypeScript compiler, will be accepted and not cause you any issues. It's completely optional in Angular 2. The reason they're doing it is for the tooling. Microsoft is putting together this sort of little service package. I don't know how they're exactly packaging it, but it will go into plugins for WebStorm, Sublime. That's what they're using in Visual Studio. We're kind of making that IntelliSense piece for TypeScript available to a bunch of IDEs, which is very un-Microsoft-like. They're embracing like the community, and not that everyone doesn't have to use Visual Studio, but they should still be able to enjoy TypeScript. There's already some support in WebStorm and IDEA. I don't know what's going to happen with what Microsoft has versus what JetBrains already has, and if they're going to just get together and merge that together, there'll be two, I'm not sure. So 1.4 is out now. It does not have very much for ES6 support. 1.5 adds a bunch of things. The beta is coming. And 1.6 is supposed to add most of the rest of the nice things in ES6. So that's probably towards the end of summer, fall, before Angular 2 is released. There should be a TypeScript with a lot of those nice things. If you come to any of the JavaScript meetups, they talk about ES6 all the time because they're super excited about classes and modules and all these things you have to kind of fake in JavaScript now that will just be part of the language and just get it for free. So this is all just built around productivity, testing. You'll have like typed APIs. So if people are trying to call your API, they can see like, it's an integer, it's a string, it's an object. Talk about animation a little bit. For 1.4, it was a big refactoring. They went through and really learned how they should be building it and refactored a lot of stuff. They tried to keep it all still functioning and keep the APIs working, and did for the most part. So this is just an example of it. You know, the callbacks, you can do a start, then, and then have your function that's called when the animation's done. Allows you to chain animations together, things like that, or perform some action when the animations are done. Anchoring we talked about a little bit. There's an ngAnimate wrap that you put on these two things, and then you can animate between them. The future stuff is pretty cool. They're talking about a runner, which allows you to play, pause, restart your animations so that you can debug them and really work with them and get them really nice and 60 FPS. They're doing the same thing as the router, where 1.5, they're going to both be the same across the two versions, and they're going to try to push that forward, supporting both. ngTimeline is something that is very interesting, where you can schedule a timeline of all these different animations, and he showed an example of like a minute animation of things flying around and designing and doing this, and so you can come up with really nice animations that like have pauses between them and are very well timed. And he had one where I think you move the mouse around, and all these little things would animate to follow the mouse, but they wouldn't just animate at once. The first one would animate first, and the next one a few milliseconds after. So it kind of like a snake or a tail that kind of moves. You can build those sorts of animations with this timeline that they're working on. Observables are a big deal in Angular 2. It's a sort of one of their core first-class citizens now. High performance. It's pretty technical, and there was a big talk. One of the Netflix guys was in this talk talking about the reactive RxJS. It's got some sort of complicated pieces, but for what they needed to do, which was really pushing, what you can do in a browser, it worked for them. Some nice things with observables, you can sort of have your WebSocket auto-connect or auto-reconnect, auto-retry things. So it's a very interesting new sort of feature. And one of the key sort of gotchas, they said, you need to dispose of those when they go out of scope. Otherwise, they kind of sit there and drain and leak your memory. So that one is one that's more of an advanced topic that we could talk about some more or see the video.
So when it says it has an Angular toolkit,
I don't know if it's like just one directive. I think it's a whole library that sort of wraps RxJS for Angular.
To use within Angular.
Yeah,
Okay,
it has APIs for Angular.
Oh, okay, good.
I haven't had a chance yet to look into it much. But it sounds pretty interesting because we're using Play. We're doing stuff with actors and reactive programming on the back end. And this brings some of those ideas to the front end.
With like Akka and stuff?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, wow.
So there was more discussion of the migration. A lot of people are working with Angular 2, kind of playing with it now, and also using ES6. There's things that the JavaScript group has talked about a lot, like Tracer, TypeScript compiler, as well as Babel is a tool out there that will work for grunt and gulp to take your, transpile your ES6 to ES5, which actually will work in a browser today. ES6 is not supported across browsers today. So we talked about using the new router. It's mostly a boilerplate conversion. They showed changing your controllers, and they're like, oh, we have to change this, we have to change this, and then they show you the diff, and really it's just sort of that top part where you define your controller. It changes a little bit, but your actual code in there is unchanged. So that's really easy. Directives have a little bit more to do. But again, it's mostly that boilerplate. A lot of it is your directive definition is a lot simpler. So certain complicated things you had to put in there, like isolated scope and some of those things, you don't need to define as much. And there's new directives. There are sort of types. There's component directives. So something that will be an element, like my map. Those will be component directives. They come with isolated scope by default. A lot of things are just defaulted, and they work for components. Then there are structural directives that do things like ngRepeat or ngIf, where they're actually taking things in and out and manipulating the DOM. They've got their own sort of way that they're built. And And then there are decorator directives, which is, you know, you put like an expandable on a text area, and now that text area, you can click it and it auto-expands. It just adds behaviors to existing elements. Those are kind of like attribute directives. So by splitting them out into kind of the three that people use the most today, you're able to default a lot of the settings and simplify the complication of directives, which is one of the more complicated parts of it. So a little bit here talking about bind to controller, controller as, and then there's a module component that's proposal right now, but definitely if you can start using controller as and bind to controller in your directives today, you'll be a lot closer to being able to do Angular 2.
Hey Mike, question. Did you say earlier that the scope is going away?
Yes. So if you use controller as today, you can pretty much get rid of scope. And you're basically putting your controller in your DOM and then just referring to that. So you do like controller as a VM, and then instead of just, you know, person, you do VM.person. It solves the issue where a lot of times in models you need to have a dot because there's some weird, you know, you think it's a scope that you have and it's not really the scope. So sometimes you have to put that dot in there to get it to resolve the right scope. But if you use controller as, that goes away, your scope goes away. You don't have to have everything on like this global scope that it's inherited by everything.
Okay.
So we're already starting to do that today. Hopefully get it throughout most of our projects soon. It's part of the style guide, which is here. We converted a couple today. I was just doing code reviews. I'm like, why don't you make that controller as? And you know, it wasn't like, oh my God. Really, it took like less than a minute. It's just one little statement in your controller, delete the scope, rename everything to, you know, replace scope with VM, and then in your view, just do the same thing and put, you know, control where you have ngController equals something controller. You just put something controller as VM, and then all throughout your page, you just do VM dot. And that cleans up a lot of your scope. It solves quite a few issues. So Style Guide is done by both Todd Motto and John Papa. They have two separate ones that are options, and they'll both tell you that neither is like a rule that you have to follow. It's sort of some best practices. What they suggest for companies to do is pick one of the two that aligns best with your team, and then fork it. And if you find things you don't like in the styling, or you can update your fork and say, like, this is my company style guide. When we do code reviews and we write new code with new people on the team, they look at this and they know how to write Angular. They know how we do it. So a lot of the stuff comes from object-oriented programming, you know, Java, C#, etc. So single responsibility, one component per file, a lot of these things. Iffy is instantly invoked function expression. So it's like taking your functions and modules, wrapping them in this function, and then again doing double brackets. And it basically like executes it. What that does is it keeps it off of the global scope. It keeps all that stuff out of the scope. It keeps your scope really clean. We haven't started using that, but now that I've seen more examples and discussion of it, I think we're going to move that direction. Controller as we talked about. Lift is a whole like acronym of different things that you should be doing. JS Hint will help you with common JavaScript sort of bugs and errors and reliability issues. JS CS I haven't started using yet, but now I'm kind of interested since I'm looked at it. It's kind of like check style for your JavaScript. So it checks things like spaces here and enters, and like you've got, I don't know if it does like JS doc checking, but that'll help you across a larger project enforce that the code is consistent and makes the thing. And then there's a whole lot more. There's a whole huge GitHub project, and the README is the style guide. The other important thing with the style guide is there's a lot of why. So it's not just do this, but it's do this and here is why, because it helps avoid these issues, because it will save your life in the future and things like that. So he has specifically gone through everyone and provided whys, and the community's also added theirs. If there was something he was like, why? Well, because that's what I like, and that's what I prefer. He took all that out because it's not a strong enough reason. Right. So all the stuff in the guide is there for reasons that are well spelled out.
So how does that guide compare with like the Google Angular JS guide?
Google Angular JS guide?
Yeah, I mean Google has one on. I guess you haven't looked at it.
It's not the recommended.
Okay.
Whatever they have. It might have been something that they put out early, but that's kind of, even Google will not tell you, like, jump up a style guide. It's automatic. Like, go look at it. That's the one to use. They're pushing more and more of this sort of responsibility and sort of whatever you want to call it, to the community, giving the community the control. And if they want to champion a certain piece of Angular, they're totally embracing it. I'm not going to go into this too much. A lot of I18N stuff, we're not using this, but it's definitely something that I've been thinking about. With GWT, internationalization is a lot easier, a lot more tools that are just there for it. Swing and things like that as well. There is something for Angular 1 called ngTranslate that helps in a lot of ways, but we're trying to do better. We're trying to work with real professional translators at major companies so that you get a bundle that the translators are expecting to see. You can give it to them, and you can give it to them with helpful comments or descriptions of sort of the context, so they know, what this certain word means. It's not like a pipe that you pick up off the ground. It's a pipe, programming or something. We're also talking about some different tools, so allow providing screenshots or live previews. A couple of examples here of having this attribute that you can put as like I18N in your code, and then when the tool runs, it will pull that out and say, okay, here's the label, here's the context along with it, so the translators get a little more information, both for the labels and then also for placeholders and input fields. There's already some things around plurals and gender which can be complicated. That is improving in 1.4. And then they're working on a sort of pseudo translation tool, which will kind of just inject into your app a bunch of crap, but crap that makes all your sentences twice as long and puts into weird characters as if it was a foreign language. So you don't have to wait for the translators to get you the bundles back, and you can still touch with your app and just see that your layouts adjust properly. Angular material, there's like a material bootstrap, there's Polymer and their core elements and their paper elements that are material. And then there's Angular project, driven by the Angular team, but a lot of community support and work is going to as well. We are using it It's not quite ready. We've been giving them a lot of feedback, opening bugs and things like that. It is really nice. You know, you click on buttons, you get the nice animations. The input fields are really nice. You get a pop-up. The label is there, but then it moves up, so you can write into it. Also with ng messages, you get messages explaining why that field's invalid right now. Lots of accessibility features. It works with ng Aria. All the components are focused on being accessible. And built for mobile, Flexbox is amazing. If you've done Bootstrap and you don't other sorts of layouts, you get into some things where it kind of restricts you from doing what you want. Flexbox really just super flexible, lets you do things like 10%, 5%, 8%, 80%, and I want them all to be at the top, or I want them to be at the bottom, at the end, at the beginning, in the center. So just the sort of things you wish you could tell, but it actually works. You don't have to, do I need to put like auto margins, or do I need to tell it align text, or whatever. It's also themable, so you can define a theme in your config. It says, you know, accent color should be green. I want my primary colors to be blue, and my warning colors to be bright red. Or you can, have a dark theme, so I'm going to just define the theme differently. And then that will go across your entire application. So you just tweak one thing, and now every button is this new color. The MD Media Service is really nice for, they have a lot of things like flex, flex small, flex greater than small, that will, on a phone, we want these things to, take up the full width of the screen. But on a large device, I might want them only to take up a third of the screen each. This ties into that, where you can say in your ng class or in your other sort of expressions, you can say, MD media, and then ask it, is the screen size right now small, or is it large, and then apply a certain style or do a certain thing in that case. So very powerful. Still working on some components. Chips are sort of the kind of like in your email, you'll see a name and a circle kind of around it with an X in it. It has like maybe a picture and a label, and you can drag and drop them around. Those are chips. Date time picker is also being worked on. Menus, like drop-down menus where you have multiple levels, those are still being worked on. And then sort of a list where you can have like kind of an accordion type thing on your work. But those are all things that they're hoping to get in for 1.0, which should be in the next few months. But they do have a lot of really powerful components, inputs. Select just came in, icons, and all kinds of other things. There are quite a few issues that are being fixed with IE and Firefox, but you can play around with most of it on Chrome until they fix those. Another talk on Angular React. It does make your app a little bigger, 0.5 MB, and there's an extra build step you have to do. But if you're using Angular 1 and it's just not fast enough for whatever you need to do right now, it can give you a boost in speed. With React, you have to write a lot more code in sort of the MVC framework to make it work for you. You combine it with Angular, you get a lot of those pieces. So it's possibly a good trade-off if you need that. But in Angular 2, you'll get that much speed and then even more. So it just depends on what you're interested in. React is exciting for a lot of people these days. References, I believe I've shown everyone most of these so far. I'll post these slides so you'll have access to the links in the community and also in the Google Plus event. That is sort of the real high level, quick zip through it. What sounded interesting? What do you want to hear more about? Not tonight.
Yes. If you haven't had any experience with Angular at all, and you'd just like to get into it, would you think that it would be better not to go to the old one at all and just head onward?
Say not at this point, no.
Why would you say that?
All the examples, for the most part now, are for one. If you're starting a brand new app right now, it needs to be delivered.
No, not necessarily that you need to make an app, but
just to play with it.
Right.
2 is still not. There's going to be bugs. There's going to be issues, and learning with 1.3 is very stable. There's a lot of good tutorials and answers and documentation out there for it. So I don't think we're at that point yet. If you're sort of an advanced Angular user and you really want to sort of trailblaze and just try it and then throw away your code or throw away your app or come back to it in a few months and mess with it some more, then that's definitely a good time to use Angular 2 right now. But it's very much alpha.
Yes, I heard they. I have to be careful of what I think I heard. I think I heard that in the first speech or whatever that we talked about that they're moving a few of the apps that currently use at 1.x to the latest in May.
That's still the plan.
Yeah.
They repeated that. The goal is not though to say that Angular 2 is ready in May.
No, but
to find more of the sort of last minute issues and some of the big problems that they need to fix before customers have those same problems. So yeah, they're thinking. I don't know if that's ready for beta in May. I don't know. Maybe June is more likely.
Yes, it would appear that Angular 2 though is altered just a lot, and if you don't have any experience at all,
the concepts are still there, even though some of them are hidden or done slightly differently. So there's not really anything you would learn in Angular 1.3 or 1.4 that isn't valuable anymore. But I think at this point you've run into too many sort of issues or bugs.
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, there's a number of questions people ask is, I'm starting a new app today, should I use 1 or 2? And well, the answer is 1 because 2 is not ready. It just entered alpha. It's not ready for production. There's lots of bugs. There's lots of features that haven't been implemented yet that are just proposals and designs that aren't in there yet. They do have a lot of things working, and they are able to show incredible speed increases and other things, but it's not, some of those APIs might change completely, and you'll have to rewrite. So 1.5 will be much closer to where you're writing stuff that will easily migrate to 2 and similar concepts. But I wouldn't discourage anyone from writing an app or starting to learn, one right now, because it's going to be a good experience. They're going to learn about how to structure their app. They're going to hopefully learn about testing. There's a lot of Angular is built with testing in mind. All the examples come with tests and stuff like that. Questions? Anyone? What do you want to see? What do you want to hear more about? What do you want to see videos about? Do you want to get a lot more basic than this, or do you want to see some of this and some of the basics?
I think a lot of times it's easy to do the basic stuff kind of on your own because you're kind of going back and forth between video and coding and stuff. But then it's when some of those basic things start to not make sense that it's somebody made the suggestion that we bring in code that you're working on and stuff and be able to talk about different things. And that I think is really, really valuable. Because it always helps to have another set of eyes on code that you've looked at for 2 hours and can't figure out what's going on. And then
Oh yeah, that's what it is.
yeah, exactly. It's always the case, right? And somebody else will just have solved that problem. So it's, that could be very valuable.
Yeah, these Egghead.io videos are great for, okay, how do I write a controller? How do I get started? It will tell you. Mm-hmm. So you have a basic app that has data binding, and you start playing with it, and then if you get into something that's a little messy, you can find a video that relates to, well, how do I do ng repeat, or how do I do these other things. So the videos are great for teaching yourself, because you don't need to go watch a 30-minute video to learn about something. You watch 2 minutes, you go code it, like this isn't working, you watch the video again, you go fix it, and it's nice to like iterate through that process. The descriptions of what's happening and why it's happening are very clear.
Cool.
I think there was actually one learning language.
Yes.
Oh, really?
I used that for, I think, a month as a reference guide. Every time
Oh,
I forget
is it 20 minutes or is it a month?
Well, I used it for a month as a reference.
Yeah, Dan Wallin has 2 different videos and like books and audiobooks. But there's one, Learn Angular in 60-ish minutes, and then there's one, Learn Angular in 20-ish minutes. If you just don't know the concepts of Angular, and you just want to understand what the general ecosystem is about and how things fit together, those videos will help it sort of pop in your head like, oh, this is how Angular works. And then that's a good starting point before you even come to these Egghead videos. You can just search for Angular in 20-ish minutes or Angular in 60-ish minutes, and he's got full videos on YouTube that walk you through not just the code, but the ideas and how it works and how it's different than jQuery, or how it's different than writing Swain or C#. Yeah. So those are also very good. Code School also has free Angular. They have one learning, and they have another that's shaping up with Angular. So you can go through the Code School stuff, and they step by step are giving you challenges and whatnot, but they're really simple, like step by step things that they'll help you learn some of the basics and some of the directives and services and things like that, and give you like points along the way. They actually just got bought. They're an Orlando company. They just got bought out by Pluralsight. Which, if you're really getting into Angular and you want more advanced content and material that's very professional, Pluralsight is where to go. I think you have to pay for most all of it. A lot of companies today are providing that as training for their employees. It's all video based, just the same, but there are bigger pieces on more advanced concepts, really walking you through how to set up integration testing for your app, or how to do these, some of these more professional focused things. I have a stack of 30-month free trials for Pro website that I will make available at some of these future Angular events.
Cool.
So once you get past, some of the basics, those can, they've got courses on advanced directives, on integration testing in Angular, lots of good stuff there. More questions on what all these words mean?
So what would you change right now in the application? So when 2.0 comes out, you don't have to be. So for example, controller as, that would be a good change.
Yes.
Other than, what are these?
Controller as 1.4 is in a release candidate 0 or 1 now. So very soon, in the next month or so, that's going to be out, and you'll be able to use the new router. We'll see. Our app right now has got a fairly decent amount of routing and nesting and whatnot, and we're a UI router, so we definitely need to get onto the new router. When we're going to be able to do that, how easy that's going to be, we'll see.
Does it handle routing better than the UI router?
Yes. The UI router is all state-based, whereas the new router is more based on your location and URLs and parameters and whatnot. But I think it'll not be too bad. We'll see. Yeah, I think controller ads, both in your controllers and in your directives, which we haven't quite got there for our directives yet, but I think that's one of our next steps. And then just other style guide things like using the ifs. There's another thing that you can do where you declare your controller, and then you just do function, and that's your controller. One of the other things you can do is make your controller a named function. So function, this controller, and then the content, and then in your declaration, you do module.controller, your named function, this controller, and it makes that very small. And then later when you have to refactor, all you have to change is that. You don't have to really even get near your code. And it also makes any further refactoring and migration easier. We haven't got there yet either. I've sort of been looking at that, and I think it works better with like ES6 and TypeScript if you format it like that as well.
Some of the style guide stuff you showed, like the if thing, is that ES6 or is that Angular 2?
It's just fancy JavaScript stuff. If you do Angular, you don't have to be a JavaScript wizard a lot of the time. You can accomplish a lot just with your Angular statements and the DOM, and ng repeats and things that do powerful things. But these are some sort of techniques that have been used on more advanced JavaScript projects that are being brought in and sort of shaped in a way that makes sense. Open that up here. So here it is, John Papa Angular Style Guide. There's a table of contents. It's got all this stuff. And you don't have to do all this. Like, we're not using Yeoman and a number of other things in there, but it's good to look at a few of these. Here's lift. Locating your code is easy. Identify the code at a glance. Flat structure as long as possible, and try to stay dry. So, organize your code in an obvious way that you can later find that file that you're looking for. And each of these has a section describing it. Identify, so if you look at this service, put all your API definitions at the top. Because what you look at, you want to see what's the API to the service. But get rid of all the code, put all the code at the bottom in named functions, and then just do this sort of API declaration at the top. So that you open the file, you see what it does. You can easily go somewhere else or just navigate to the function that you want. And just control click it the way you want. Here's the iffy stuff. So this looks pretty normal. That's what you would do. But then what they're saying is you're going to wrap your whole file in this sort of bracket function, close bracket, double bracket right here. And this is sort of your invocation. And if you wrap that, it just makes your scoping and global a lot easier. It looks weird.
So not use app dot.
What?
So not use app dot controller.
Well, you still do that here, and all your code is the same. It's just that you wrap it in these ifs. Yeah, it makes it so none of your variables or naming has collisions outside of it. It just keeps you from, it's kind of a lot of work and it's like kind of a mess, but the kind of problems to solve are the problems that you're ripping your hair out because something weird's happening and it can't possibly be on this page, but it is.
Somewhere else, something declared a variable that happened to have the same name.
Yeah.
It's clobbering it. Yeah. Great.
So that's what those are doing. And then there's different discussions. One discussion I heard about services lately was really interesting about, should my service, a normal service will make an HTTP call and return, your JSON object. But what if I have a service that gets something really big and I want to kind of keep that in the service and then ask the service for these little bits of it, like give me this piece of it or that piece. Well, then you're using your service as a model and using it as service to your calls to the server. That's a valid thing to do, but the better way to do it is either keep all that model in your controller and have the service just make the server calls, or create another service that is your model service. So you have one service for talking to your server, maybe for your customer service, and it knows all the HTTP, it knows all the arguments to pass in and how to pull it out and do any kind of serialization stuff you need to do. But that's all in one file. And then your other is maybe a service, but called customer model. And with that, you can take this value that you got from the customer service, create this customer model, or pass it into that, and then you can query that model for what you need. So that's a separation of concern, single responsibility thing where one thing is responsible for communication and the other is responsible for sort of holding that state, holding the data. And then you can pass the model back into the service to send it to the server, but it keeps it separated. That's another thing that we haven't quite done yet. We've been getting better at writing our services, keeping the API at the top, getting it clean, but we did put some where the model logic and the communication are the same.
How would you build that if you have nested HTTP calls? So for example, think of it as a tree structure. I get a root node, and then I have a list that's inside of that. I use that to get more information. And then I use the children of that to get more, to make more metadata. And if I'm sharing a model between two controllers, how would I build that? Because that's single thing, right? So even before my gets
that's the problem that we have, is that we have that single service acting as both the communication and the model, and that makes it a singleton. So if something else calls those services, it's gonna hit that model and update them. Whereas you break out a separate service to behave as a model, you can create that and use that in a way that you have multiple of them, because it never needs to do any talking to the server. You get back, you have it return itself rather than using it. So you get a separate model for each. You get on the same page, different views that are all using separate models rather than using a single service and they're kind of clobbering each other.
So, and that would be if the models are fairly small, right? And if you have a model that has, your tree is, 100 at this level, and for every one of those, there's 50.
Yeah, it depends there on the use case and what you're doing. It may make sense to just keep that within a data structure in your controller and keep that model there. If those things are all very similar or the same, you might just have a bunch of these little services that handle holding that, but then you still keep them in an array or something in your controller. It just depends on how you want to do that. I don't think it's really expensive to create quite a few of these little service model things.
Okay.
But it may be better if you're looking at thousands to just throw that in your controller. What you're doing, but yeah, at that point you're sort of stretching to some of the limitations of like Angular 1.x when you're talking about tens of thousands of elements and things like that. But if it's just elements that you're not going to convert into actual DOM elements, you're not going to render out a list of all those elements, you're not going to put them in a table.
Yeah.
If you're going to put them in a chart or a map or something, then it's not such a big deal. You can get that data, put it in your controller, pass it to the chart, and you're all set. You don't really need to do a lot of querying and talking to that data. You mostly just need to give it for the map. Okay. Well, I'll be here next Wednesday night. If you're new to Angular, check out Egghead.io, check out some of the examples, watch some of those videos, write down questions you have, bring them next Wednesday night. If you've got certain videos that you have issues with, just keep a list of those URLs and give them to me, and we can watch them and talk about them next Wednesday. I don't know, there's an Angular Seed app. It's a good place to start as well. There's quite a few good starting places. There's a material start, which is cool, but it's using material might not be as easy. If you want to do something with material design at the same time as learning Angular, you can start with something like this one. It's using Bower and some other things. You just go and fork this off of, or clone this off of GitHub. You can start playing with it and changing things. It looks like looks like this. I thought there was an example of running. It tells you how to run the app using Node, run, HTTP server. So I'll walk you through a lot of how to get started. There's a few little gotchas in this that they're working on. This will give you an app where you've got like a menu of people, a side nav, you have a little bottom thing that pops up. Got some things to play with. We got a controller or service. They're using a lot of the best practices here. So you can just go in and say, well, I'll just change some of this content, see what happens. Or context sheet. So that's one. You could start with just a plain empty app, or you can start with one of these sort of seed or start apps. This one's just pure Angular, no material, very simple. Got like view 1, view 2, comes with some tests. You get some tests in here. You get a little JavaScript, real basic like routing, how to define your routing. This is your view. There is a tutorial on the Angular side as well, which is another good place to start out. Learn tutorial angularjs.org. And this one works with Git, so you should know how to use Git, but this one, each step, you do this sort of git clone, git checkout, so you can just check out whichever step you want to work on. It'll walk you through it, tell you how to start your server, how to run your tests, and you just go through. Here's checkout step 1 or step 0, and it explains you what the code's doing, how do you initialize your app, how some of these data binding things work. So it's a very good tutorial here. You end up with an app that's got some animations, it's calling some services. This one does, it's like a phone store kind of app. Okay, yeah, so here's the app you build. Got all these different phones. You can see like the different pictures, the little animation there. You got a bunch of data that's all like data bound in here. From a REST service, you can do sorting with animations. So by the time you walk through the tutorial, you've got a really good idea of what the different features of Angular are, including searching with animation. The real cool features of Angular gives them the live website, the data binding, and all of that stuff. So there's tons of resources. Just take some time. But if you just want to get started, learn Angular in 20-ish minutes is really just around 20 minutes. You can listen to that on the way home, or you can watch the video at home and get a real good idea. Once you see it and you start to get it, you're going to want to start coding it. And these sort of tools and tutorials will give you like instructions how to set it all up so that you can really start writing code. You don't have to worry about how do I do NPM, how do I do Bower, it'll tell you type npm install Bower, things like that. But yeah, we'll meet up every Wednesday night. If you've got some concerns or issues, or you've got a website, like bring it in. We'll talk about it. I can show you actually. I'm doing for the GDG side. I'm doing material design. So that's actually this side right here. So you saw our site that I showed you earlier. This one, this is just Bootstrap, regular old Bootstrap. This one I'm redesigning with material design, so got buttons that kind of raise up. These are on cards. You can see the little shadows. Each of these is a little card. Maybe not as clear to see on the projector. You got nice tabs up here that have a little ripple effect when you click on them, which you also can't see very well on the projector. But now you can see these are, there's a little header there on the cards. I swear there's shadows here. The button. Oh my God, you can't even see that. The buttons, sort of highlight. So this is some of the stuff I'm messing with, working with. This is all open source. It's a project called Boomerang. It's something that I'm working on, but also for the GDGs. So this is getting merged back into this GDGX Boomerang project, which is used for many GDGs around the world to host their websites easily. So once I get this material design implemented for it, which I have on the Angular material branch, you'll be able to see our fancy new website with better colors and layout than just this kind of gray. But that's sort of some of the stuff I'm working on in my spare time. So it's easy to just put together a project. This is doing a lot more. It's calling Google Plus APIs and doing things like that. But there's good examples in there to see what it's doing. If I'm also, I'm doing Gulp, which is a little more advanced. And my other project, I've got some protractor tests, which are kind of like Selenium that bring up a browser and click on things. That's pretty nice stuff. I'm hoping, sort of, as we go through this, to, I'll probably run a couple Saturday events or something for like really beginner stuff to like walk through tutorials and watch some of the beginner videos if people are interested. Maybe like code lab type things like that tutorial. But there's a company that has a few people at least here in the Melbourne area that's doing 3D printers. Remember. So Firepick Delta. These aren't just 3D printers, but they're actually like 3D manufacturing machines. And it's all open source, it's all on GitHub. There's computer vision, scanning, amazing stuff. Here's kind of what the machine looks like. So they've got a REST API that they're trying to finish off in the next month or so. They want to do a Kickstarter, which they think they can get over $500,000 for, but they need a front end, and they'd like to use Angular. So I've been talking with them, and they've said that they're really interested in doing some sort of a hackathon. where, you know, people come in, there would be probably a few different things they need that people would work on. By the end, there'll be some judging. We'll probably have someone else sometime later kind of integrate those different projects. But, you know, the team that was able to build out the most complete functionality and whatnot, and they think they might be able to actually bring some of the hardware in. So you could actually code and check as you hit the APIs, see things happen. And they're so far telling me that they'd be willing to have a 3D printer as the prize, and possibly some other smaller type things. But so they're talking about doing that sometime in April, probably mid to late April, having a hackathon here specifically for Angular. And so that's sort of one of the reasons I'm putting together a bunch of these Angular events, to get people up to speed so that we can do the hackathon, get something nice. Once they have a decent UI, they're going to go to Kickstarter and start building these things. They're kind of building something that would cost $20,000 plus, but they're trying to build it for around $6,000, and then start selling them to colleges and companies and whatnot. So you have this little thing that can do some pretty advanced manufacturing, and you don't have to ship everything to China. That's kind of one of the things to look forward to if you're interested in coming and, you know, trying out some of the stuff that you've learned about Angular, and give it a shot with a real, you know, platform that you can build on. And then that code may end up in their GitHub repository with your name on it, and you could be a contributor to get a real good experience, something you put on your resume. You help build that. Okay, well, feel free to hang out, talk. I'm gonna shut up and let you guys finish off this pizza.